book lovers, it is GSwiz here, and I'm here today to talk about my favorite books that I read in the first half of 2024. Now, if you have been following my channel for quite some time, you would know that 2024 has been a pretty challenging year for me. I've had to reduce how much content I put out within a month due to external factors, unfortunately, and that kind of did affect my reading life within the first half of this year. But things are picking up, thankfully, and I did find a few favorites in the mix, and today I'm going to be talking about them. Very excited to talk about these books because they make me so excited, and I'm hoping to find more and more favorites as the year goes on. But I guess without further ado, let's get straight into this list. So I'm gonna kick this off by talking about The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. This is the sequel and conclusion in the Stolen Heir duet, and if you guys don't know what the Stolen Heir duet is, it is a spin-off series from The Cruel Prince. I love The Cruel Prince. I love that story so much. I love the characters a lot, and I still think about The Cruel Prince to this day. I really want to reread it, and The Prisoner's Throne made me want to reread it even more because I just miss Elfame. I just miss these characters, and I'm actually personally satisfied by how much Juden Carden we got in the sequel. I mean, personally, I actually had very low expectations going into this series about how many times they would appear, and a lot of initial Cruel Prince fans were disappointed in The Stolen Heir because we didn't get those cameos, but I'm just really happy that here we got that kind of fan service, but it was still a great story overall. Like, they didn't necessarily show up in this book for the sake of Easter eggs, and I don't know, for the sake of a crossover happening. No, like, it just made sense for the story. I mean, as a fan personally, I would take multiple sequels within this world, but for some reason I actually appreciate Holly Black's minimalism when it comes to this world, because I feel as if us fans hold on to every single little piece, and sometimes it's very satisfactory, and I found that The Prisoner's Throne was a very satisfactory conclusion to this duet. I personally still want more books set within this world, but I'm really happy with the story that I got, and I really love Soren and Oak, and I just appreciate that the series put a spotlight on them, because a lot of people really wanted kind of a sequel to The Cruel Prince, and I get that, but I'm actually just happy that we have this spin-off story because I love these two characters so much. They're very complex, and I think they're very nice together, even though things get ugly, things get toxic, things get cruel. I mean, that tends to happen in the world of Elfame. I personally do not want to give too much away. I'm being pretty vague personally because I don't want to ruin any magic that comes with going into the series and being pleasantly surprised. Like, I just want people to be pleasantly surprised while reading the series, because I read this book as soon as I possibly could, and I made sure that I did not read or watch any reviews going into it. It blew me away. So yeah, it's a favorite. The next book that I have to mention that is one of my favorite books that I've read this year so far is The Serpent and the Wings of Night, or the Night Duet / novella. Pretty much everything that's within this series so far by Carissa Broadbent. I love this series so far. I do have to admit though, I am planning to reread this series sometime later this year, because personally, the mental state that I was going through at the time that I read this series was not the greatest. Like, I loved this first book, and I love the novella so much. Six Scorched Roses. Oh my goodness. It very much kind of reminded me of Beauty and the Beast in a way, and that is definitely what I appreciated about it. But overall, the series is great, but it is slightly unfortunate that I did not love the series as much as I loved the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. I love that series with everything that I have. With the Crowns of Nyaxia, I love it, but I don't love it to the extent that I loved the War of Lost Hearts, and I was kind of expecting this series to be my ultimate new favorite of all time. I think that the Crowns of Nyaxia series overall has the potential to be one of my favorite series of all time. Like, I just need to read all the books to make that decision, but at this point, I'm not convinced that this is going to be one of my favorite series of all time. But Carissa Broadbent is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I reckon that this series and the next book that comes out within the Crowns of Nyaxia might just make my top 24 of 2024. I'm really excited to reread this in the lead up to The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. I cannot wait for that book, but yeah, no, overall, I'm really enjoying this series so far, and I reckon that this series, regardless of how I was feeling at the time due to external factors, it definitely deserves to be on my favorites list of this year so far. And when I tell you that I do believe in the power of rereading, I mean it, especially because I reread this book this year, The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, and it is definitely one of my favorite books of all time now. I am obsessed with this book. I love Heart and Mercy. Upon my initial read of the series, I got really frustrated with these two because there is there's a hate to love dynamic there, and it just takes a while for things to take off, and there's a lack of communication within this book. I mean, for understandable reasons. I mean, essentially, it's a haters to lovers and pen pals to lovers love story, all of that happening for the same couple, and it's quite entertaining, but I got frustrated with it to start off with, and I didn't really care about the overall message of the book. It didn't really matter to me at the time, but this book also deals with the subject of mortality, and that wasn't really something I cared about as much when I first read this book. But after recently losing 2 loved ones within a 9-month period, this was the kind of book I really needed. This was the kind of book that really comforted me, and I have taken the time to reflect on Heart and Mercy's romance, and while it is not perfect, it is one that I find completely relatable based on what each individual character went through in this story. Overall, I love the undertaking of Heart and Mercy. I'm really happy that I did reread it. I was planning to reread it in the lead up to The Undermining of Twyla and Frank, just to re-familiarize myself with this world, and I'm actually really happy that I did that. I had absolutely no idea that this was gonna pop up on my favorites list, but it has. I mean, I've bumped the rating up. I initially rated this book like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is now a solid 5. I love this story so much. Yes, it is flawed, but to me, it is also perfect because it was definitely the right story at the right time for me. And another book on this list that I was deeply emotionally connected to was Only and Forever by Chloe Leese. This is the 7th and final book in the Bergman Brothers series, where we follow Viggo Bergman and Tallulah, and I just loved their love story so much, but I was not expecting this to hit the way that it did. Like, I was really excited for this book because Viggo Bergman quickly became my favorite side character within the Bergman Brothers series. Like, if you didn't happen to know, pretty much the Bergman Brothers book series, really it should be the Bergman siblings book series, but it was initially titled the Bergman Brothers because initially I think Chloe Leese planned for this series to only follow the brothers. So pretty much this romance contemporary series follows each sibling within the Bergman family, and there are 7 of them, and Viggo is the last one to get his love story within the series, but he's been making appearances in other books, and he has been hilarious. He's not only known as a hopeless romantic, like to the point that it's a little bit dramatic, but in the best way possible. He loves romance novels, and he will often recommend romance novels or go off about different romance novel tropes to his siblings to try to resolve conflict within their relationships. He pretty much gives relationship advice based on the fact that he loves reading romance novels, and it is adorable, and I have always loved him as a side character. He very much reminds me of the Bromance Book Club, but he's just like one person, and he never got his love story until now. And what I personally appreciate about this novel is that we get to know the dark side of Viggo Bergman. We really get to know more about him and his insecurities. And then we also meet Tallulah, who also has her own insecurities because we're also reading from her perspective. And I honestly kind of love that we got to know about their dark side and see them come together and them just making a very beautiful, healthy pairing who are just able to hash things out. But also, this book spoke to me a lot because a lot of Viggo Bergman's insecurities are some of my insecurities and were some of my insecurities going into a relationship, or insecurities that I would have that would come up when I liked someone. So if any of you have started or are in the middle of the Bergman Brothers / family series, and if you have not reached Viggo's book yet, you might think that you know Viggo Bergman, but you don't until you read this book. And you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I was actually scared that Only and Forever was gonna make me not like Viggo Bergman because we were finally gonna have his perspective, and I don't know, I was honestly scared that I was not gonna like him or that this book was gonna let me down. But this book really impressed me on every level, and it makes me very emotional just thinking about it. It really does, and in my personal opinion, this book is better than what I hoped for. Because I initially just hoped that this final book would be a tribute to everyone's story, and you know what? I'm actually really happy that this book was Viggo's book and Viggo's book only. Like, Chloe Leese could have given me what I initially wanted, but knowing that this exists, I'm even more happy. And I am actually fine with not getting the ideas that I wanted initially because this was a perfect way to conclude the series, but also to give Viggo Bergman the love story that he truly deserved. This book is amazing. I mean, the series is amazing. It's so good. It holds up, and Only and Forever just proves that even more. But yeah, no, I'm gonna need more people to read the series. I'm going to need more people to talk about the series, I swear. I just want more people in my life to read the series, okay? Is it too much to ask? And the next 2 book series that I have to mention that I've placed on my favorites list for the year so far are 2 very similar series that I was thinking it's either or both. And so I'm mentioning both right now. These are 2 alien romance series, one being the Ice Planet Barbarian series. So far from what I've read, I've really enjoyed it. And then the Spider's Mate series. Each of these 2 series remind me of one another, and I think that's kind of why I like both of them. So I actually kicked this year off by reading the Ice Planet Barbarian series. I actually got like 5 or 6 books into it, maybe 7 actually. Yeah, no, actually it's been 7 books. And so far so good. I did not love the first book, and I think it's because everyone kept on summarizing the plot of the first book everywhere when Ice Planet Barbarians blew up on TikTok. And so I went into this book knowing what was gonna happen. And the first book in general isn't necessarily the greatest because it just builds the world, but the rest of the books are just very wholesome romances. And I find that the Ice Planet Barbarian series definitely has more wholesome moments than the Spider's Mate series, but the Spider's Mate series very much reminds me of the Ice Planet Barbarian series in its survival aspects, and that's why I think I really like both of them, like, a lot. This one is definitely more wholesome, but this one I do appreciate for the world building and kind of the high stakes. Even though this one also has high stakes, I feel as if the Ice Planet Barbarian series, because we have so many more romances and so many more love stories within that world, and this is a companion romance series, this one is definitely more wholesome, but I appreciate the dark and grittiness of this series, but also the love story between Catan and Ivy. But I do also have to give a shout out to the Spider's Mate series because I feel as if it got a little bit more epic in scope. I mean, yes, the Ice Planet Barbarian series is definitely epic, but because we have such a big threat in this series, it just made the story all the more epic. And at times I seriously cannot stop thinking about how things got scary within the series. I mean, things did get scary in the other series that I mentioned, but I just remember summarizing like every little detail to Camilo because I just needed to vent to someone about the series, like, in a good way, and he was just like, whoa, that's dark. Like, what happens at the end of the second book is really dark. This series got really dark, and I feel as if the Ice Planet Barbarian series kind of makes survival alien romance a little bit more palatable, but yeah, this one got dark, and I kind of appreciated it for that aspect as well. But yes, I'm just grouping these two together because I like them for pretty similar reasons, and for some stupid reason I told myself it was either or, and I just decided to choose both. And another favorite that I have to mention on this list today is the Kraken Sacrifice by Katie Roberts. I actually initially thought that the Gargoyle's Captive was gonna be my favorite in the series, and turns out it was not. I mean, yes, Grace was the protagonist's name, and I do like gargoyles, but I still have some problems with that book personally. I feel as if the couple in that book need therapy. They just needed to work some stuff out on page, and I just really wish that they did that. But I feel as if the characters in this book, the book that came before the Gargoyle's Captive, these characters did a much better job with relationship development within a small page count. I love this book so much. It made me cry, but it also made me smile. It made me very happy, and I sincerely appreciate how things were hashed out within the story. Now, it's no secret that I love Katie Roberts' books, but this is definitely one of the best books I've read from Katie Roberts in a while, so as much as I can say I love all of them and I would recommend all of them, I'd have to say out of all the books that I've read from Katie Roberts very recently, this one right here is the one I would recommend the most. And it's not only a lovely read, it's a book that is under 200 pages, so it's very easy to consume, but so much happens within this book for this relationship specifically. I actually thought that barely anything was gonna happen because the love interest, the guy, keeps on walking away, and then the female protagonist in the story starts feeling abandonment because she's gone through abandonment previously. This book deals with a very tough subject matter of abandonment, but within the small page count of this book, I really feel like Katie Roberts developed this romance in the best way possible, in the most concise but best way possible. I know that these stories are meant to be concise. I feel as if that was the weakness of the third book in the series, but in my personal opinion, this book delivered, and it's still one that I think about to this day, and that's why I have placed it on my favorites list of the year so far. That is how you know that a book is really good. If it has a very small page count, if you didn't spend too much time reading it, but if you spent a lot of time thinking about it, that's when you know it's really good. And the next book that I have to mention on this favorites list is a book that I don't physically own, but I loved. This was one of the first books I read this year, and that, my friends, is Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue. This book was just dark, and it was delicious. It was very hot, but it had a very interesting plot that kept me hooked. Like, I listened to the audiobook in one sitting. I was so compelled. I could not stop listening to this, and I've decided that I'm planning to reread this book in the lead up to the rest of the books in the series. I was just waiting for Soul of the Witch, which is the final book in the series. I was waiting for that to come out on audio before binge listening to the rest of the series, and so I've decided that I'm gonna go back and reread this one. And I also need physical copies of this book series. I mean, I technically pre-ordered the Fabled ones And yes, I also pre-ordered the traditionally published special edition of the first book. I'm so excited. The pages look so pretty. Oh my goodness. I cannot wait to receive that one. That is going to be my prized possession. But yeah, no, I really loved this book. And yeah, you know, this book got really dark. I'm not going to recommend it to everyone. And at times, things were just a bit too wild, too rowdy. But I honestly cannot help but love this book. And I cannot wait for the rest of the books in the series. I am hearing that the first book is better than the second book. I am looking forward to the second book, but I really liked the first book and I'm planning to reread this one because I just want to revisit the delicious and dark time that we had in Her Soul to Take. And yes, I'm honestly hoping that the rest of the series does make my favorites list for the year, but if it does not, that is okay. I really love this first book though. They're all standalones, but it's a companion series. I'm looking forward to continuing on, but I cannot wait to follow the main characters of the first book again. And the next series that I have to mention on my favorites list of the year is the Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts. This is a manga series that I have fallen in love with. I've also watched the anime and I am also obsessed with the anime, but I think I love the manga more because there's more content in here and I was able to consume the story at my own pace. I was able to take the time with these panels and just really soak it in. Now, I've mentioned this a couple of times on my channel when talking about this manga series, but if you have not heard of this manga series, in my personal opinion, it's pretty much Beauty and the Beast meets A Soul to Keep by Opal Rain. Both stories I'm personally a fan of, and it's just so magical. I really love the characters and this world, and I just wish that I could follow more and more stories with these characters, but I'm very satisfied with what we got at the end of the day. And while yes, I do prefer the story within the manga, the anime adaptation is accurate for the most part. I would say if you are wanting to consume this story in any way, I would recommend the anime, but I would also recommend at some point reading the manga. Because if you've watched the anime adaptation and if you're considering reading the manga, I think that the best way to see it is that the manga has some bonus content that you might appreciate. That is how I saw it because I did watch the anime before going into the manga story, and I'm really happy that I did because even though I appreciated the anime adaptation, I think I got even more out of the manga reading experience, and honestly, it kind of felt like a bonus. This story is amazing. I love Sarifi and I love Leonhardt. I miss them so much. I am planning to reread the series for the days to come. I might just do a yearly reread of the series because I'm just so tempted to get to this now, but I think I might benefit from rereading the series next year. I don't know. We will see. This series gives me all the warm fuzzies as a Beauty and the Beast lover, and there's another series on this list as well that I have to mention that does as well. The second last book that I'm going to mention on this list today is A Soul to Heal by Opal Rain. And yes, I did just mention A Soul to Heal from Opal Rain. I loved that book last year. I read it in December of last year. Absolutely devoured it. It's definitely one of my favorite books ever. And A Soul to Heal is also one of my favorite books ever. Yes, I do have to admit I do have a very similar opinion to those who have read this book. I did prefer the first book in the series, but this second book was still a 5-star book for me. And I definitely think that's because Opal Rain tasked herself to write about such complex characters in the story with very complex plot lines, but they wrote all of it in the best way they possibly could. And that is definitely what I appreciate about the story. I also read the story at a time that I was going through a lot and I needed to heal, and I thought that maybe a book where heal was in the title would help me. And this story definitely did help me. I usually struggle with a trope that was written about within the story. I usually really struggle with that trope because I am kind of afraid of it. I have talked about it previously. I'm not sure if I talked about it in like a least favorite tropes video or a pet peeves video. I don't remember, but I went into this book expecting something to happen with that trope, and it did happen. But for some reason, I really appreciated the journey. I really appreciate Nameless and Dolores' dynamic. I really love them as characters. Even though I prefer the first book in the series, I think A Soul to Heal was just as impactful for me because I grew attached to these characters and I saw how much they grew together and individually. And honestly, all of that left a big impact on me. I still think about this book months later. I'm still thinking about these characters and I just love the series so much. I think overall, this series is just going to be a hit series for me. Unless, of course, at any point, any of these characters do each other dirty. I don't think I could hate this series. I think I have a lot of faith in Opal Rain to write incredible love stories within this world, and that is exactly what Opal did with A Soul to Heal. I do kind of wish we got more of these characters individually. I'm being very vague about it, but I still very much appreciate the story, and that's why I could not help help but give this story a 5 out of 5 stars, even though I did prefer the first book, and I cannot wait to continue on with the series because it's so good. And last but certainly not least, the final book series that I have to mention within my favorite books / series I've read in 2024 so far is the State of Grace series by Colette Rhodes. This was a pleasant surprise. I read this book series in June, like just in the nick of time for this video. I was not expecting this book series to pop on this list, but it did, and it's just so good. I did mention this in a wrap-up video. If you are struggling with a bonds that tie book hangover, like I did, this is the perfect series to jump into next because it's so good, but I mean, the relationships are much more healthy, and there's sword crossing as well. Overall, the State of Grace series was just a very good time. I do, unfortunately, have conflicting feelings about the final book. I feel as if the final book could have had a stronger epilogue, and I think that Grace could have been more present in different areas of society within that book, personally. That entire book is just like all these characters being separated and then coming together, but I think that we could have had a few more impactful scenes with what happened to society at the end of book 5, in my personal opinion. Everything was just a little bit rushed in the final book, but honestly, when I do think about the series, I'm not thinking about how much book 5 let me down. I think about how the series lifted me up. I love each and every one of these characters so much, and I neglected to mention how much I appreciate Silver. Was it Silver? Or was it Bullet? What? Bullet! No, Bullet! No, he's not Silver, he's Bullet. I kind of hate the fact that I didn't mention that Bullet reminded me of Oliver Bergman from the Bergman Brothers series because he has so many musical references. He kind of reminds me of Vigo a little bit as well. I think he's like a good combination of Vigo and Oliver Bergman. But oh my goodness, he's just so wholesome. I love Bullet so much. And then when you find out what he's been going through this entire time, you're like, oh my goodness. Yeah, no, my heart breaks for the guy. But I also love the other characters as well. I mean, Riot, personally, I have a soft spot for Riot. And then I love Dare and Wild so much as well. I love these characters. And I also very much appreciate how this book series deals with hypocrisy within organized religion. I honestly just found it so ironic but fascinating and realistic to see the religion, the organized religion / cult within the story that was very much known to be sacred and holy and kind of a reflection of how, you know, some churches are within our real society, how their practices were even more demonic, but then they would call out demons for existing. It was just very interesting. It reminded me of the Blood and Ash series, but I think this series kind of hits harder because this is an urban fantasy series. It's not a high fantasy series, therefore it's closer to what our society looks like, and it was kind of scary at times. Like, at times this series gave me the ick, but for a very good reason, because it just made me realize how realistic it was, and yeah, it just felt really spooky. I really appreciate the series though, and additionally, mythology also makes the mix as well. That becomes more prominent from book 2 and 3 onward. But yeah, overall, the series was just very fun. I also do quite appreciate that these characters don't stay within the same place the whole series. Like, they travel, it's nice. I just kind of wish that the series was just a little bit longer. Like, it could have been 100 pages longer, just to tie some loose ends. Like, I think that this series did leave some loose ends. I still think about it very fondly, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm tempted to write some fan fiction to tie those loose ends myself. I don't know. And I also very much appreciate Grace. I think 2024 gave me a new favorite character, and that is Grace. I love her so much. I love all the books and series I talked about on this list today, but I especially love the State of Grace series. It is just my everything at this point. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the blue heart emoji. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already joined the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social media. I'm at gswizzelbooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at GOODREADS. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at gswizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
How did I weigh half and I flipped it in a double? How did I weigh half and I flipped it in a double?